Mm. Chitranjan sir, can you please confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
All right,
Yes,
great, great, great.
it's visible.
All right, so in previous sessions we were talking about introduction. We have learned about embedded C. We have seen about RISC and CISC. We have seen the different registers, and we have seen the memory mapping. We have touched the ARM instruction set. We have also seen how to manipulate registers in your ARM Cortex CPU and see where all your primary register data or the primary registers or the user registers that you have in your chip are manipulating in order to shuffle around the data and do the process that it wants to do. So in today's session we will be this might look familiar because this is the same slide from your previous class session. So but we'll be finally discussing about the startup sequence of the ARM CPU. We'll be looking at the STM32F103 and whatever things goes inside that for a startup. Then we will be talking about interrupts, and interrupts being a very important topic. I might show you one example of an interrupt, maybe in a STM32 Cube ID, and then we will be talking about HAL and CMSIS abstraction. And in fact, we will not be talking about the abstraction, but we will be talking about how does it relate to bare metal programming in abstraction. And finally, I'll be telling you a bit. I'll be demonstrating what we will be doing in bare metal programming and what your assignment is about when it comes to bare metal programming. All right, so in your first topic today, which is the startup sequence, we will be talking about what all things go inside your CPU whenever you are starting up the CPU. So for doing that, let me just show you the STM32F103 on Keel. Mind you, today most of your demos will be on Keel. Only one of them will be in CubeID. So, and I expect you to use Keel on your system because most of you do not have a hardware. So Keel only provides you simulation. So that is the only way you can test your code if it works or not. All right. So I will be sharing this. Great. So this is one demo that I'll be showing you later on, but let us first dive into the startup of this. So I hope have all of you have seen how to get started with this ARM toolchain setup. And if you have not, please write it in the comment section so that uh, perhaps I can message you directly, because this is very crucial for you, because otherwise you'll be thinking how these things came about. I haven't discussed this particular program. We have just learned about how to declare your main.c file and how do you write your main function. This is the main function. Okay, so in this session we will be talking about the startup sequence. So if you look at the slide over here, whenever you press the reset button, and reset as in whenever you are starting the CPU or applying power to it through the port which is there on your board. So if you have a chip which is there on, or maybe on your custom board, or if you have something like a developer board, which is like in case of STM it is the Nucleo, which is equivalent to your Arduino, which is for your AVR processors. So you always have a reset button over there, and basically that is the entry point into the main process of your system, and that is what initiates everything. So whenever you are applying power to your system, it is going to get into a reset state. In fact, how reset works is it's basically an active high reset, and it is basically an inverting logic. So whenever you are applying power to it, it automatically gets into the 5 volt region. So you it all automatically moves from a 0 to a 5 volt state, and so that is why it gets reset automatically. And there is some timing delay, maybe of some microseconds to some milliseconds depending upon your particular chip, but that is required before any of the processes can start. Okay, so once you press the reset button or apply power to your chip, it is going to set all the registers, and registers as in the 13 13 user registers that we talk, P0 to P13, and the program stack register, program counter, and all those things will be set to the reset value. Now in most of the cases the reset value is going to be hexadecimal 0 or 8 times 0, but in some cases, in case of program counter, it is going to basically be set to the previous address that was there, and it is going to be set in a state which is of no significance, because anyway you are going to change the value of this, load the data of your determines the mode, and then automatically is going to fetch the main stack pointer address. Okay, so I had mentioned about your main stack pointer and the program stack pointer. Main stack pointer is basically the entry address of your code. So in last session we have seen something about the initialization of the main function, and I think in one of the videos that I shared about writing the main.c function, I have also told what is the significance of main and how does the program get into your main function. So what happens is, so you press the reset button, all values of the register are set to the reset value, then it determines the boot mode, and then it's going to fetch the main stack pointer address from the location 00000000. This is hexadecimal 0, which is basically the starting point of the memory mapping. Now over here I'm going to use the term registers and memory cells. In the scope of discussion of at least this week, register and memory cells means all the memory locations that are there inside your particular IC. So in we discovered that we can address to a maximum of 4 gigabytes of memory, which is 4 into maybe 2 to the power 40, I suppose. No, 2 to the power 40. 4 gigabytes is 2 to the power 34, 2 to the power 32. 2 to the power 32 addresses that you can access through this. So 2 to the power 32 addresses had different regions that we talked, and the starting point of that was your program region where you store all your programs. So this is going to set the value of the first entry point of that program. So determines the boot mode, and after going from boot mode we got into the address space, and then from the address space it is going to access the address of your main program. So the main stack pointer address is basically going to give you the address of the initialization setups, and then it is going to pull the address of the main function that you may enter, and it is going to show the address of where that main function is residing on your memory. It is going to pull it from there, and it is then going to fetch your main routine. Now over here I have mentioned something called the boot mode. In certain cases, in certain boards you might see that you have 3 pins. So in STM32F103, the blue pill chip, you will see that there are pins for setting the boot mode 0 and boot mode 1. So what that is basically the way of determining where your firmware is saved. So if you have in boot mode 0, you can set it in a way where you are programming it to your you are programming your chip. So you can set it in a programming mode, so that will boot into the programming mode, or if you are using it in a user mode, you can also set it to the user mode, and that is basically set by hardware. In some cases that is hard coded, in other cases that is going to have jumpers in order to set it. I hope my voice is not echoing or reverbing, because I am in a hall today, so I hope my sound is fine, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So alright, so now when we see the program implementation of this is basically the file which has the startup sequence, and I got this by going to file. When I made my new program, I had an when I went to project and I made my new project. When I went to project and I started my new project, I had an option for so let's call today's session is week 3, and it is your doubt clearing session 1. Okay, so let's call this, and let me make a folder of the same name, and I'll save it over there. Alright, and over here I chose my STM32F103. I chose my C8 chip. And again, this is very much comparable, and in fact some of your ST microelectronic chips are pin-to-pin compatible. So if you have something like F103, and if you go for something like F111 or F113, you can, if you have the same package, you can basically just it is going to be a drop-in replacement. and the only thing that you have to change is basically the consumption of your flash or your memory or your hardware resources such as the core speed and the clock speed. So here I mentioned you have to select the core, and then you have to select your in your device you have to select your startup. So this startup file, this startup F1 series is your device specific startup. For F1 series it is going to be a common file, so that all the F1 series of microprocessors by ST Microelectronics will have this. Mind you, if you're even using your something like a TI part, so TI also makes ARM microcontrollers. If you're using something by Texas Instruments, you will also include your startup file in that, and that will have something which is made by Texas Instrument. Over here your vendor for the startup file is ST Microelectronics, so we will be selecting that, and I'll click on OK. Once it does that, you will see that your startup comes over here. So once I click on the startup, which is system, and these are basically two files. You have a main system file and then you have a startup file. So this is what the entry point is going to be. So I did mention that what the program does is going to pull the location of your started pointer from the memory. In my presentation I mentioned that the program is going to fetch the main stack pointer address from the location 0, and then it is going to pull the address of the main routine, which is basically the piece of code which you wrote in your main program. Routine over here is synonymous with program. In your main program you wrote a piece of code, and that is what it is going to fetch. And how does it do that? It is going to do that by calling the underscore main. So it is basically going to branch it to the main C library. It is going to set the initial stack pointer, it is going to set the program counter, it is going to set the vector table, and I'll be talking about vector table when we talk about interrupts. It is also going to configure the clock system, and I'll tell you about clocks again in that demo. And it finally calls the main library. So once it gets to the main, it is then going to execute the program over there. So let me just make a main program. I'll add a new item. Let's call this main.c file. And by this time you might have seen this at least 2 or 3 times, so this should be non-trivial for you guys. Okay, so I will just write a simple main function int main, and this is going to be a void type function, so void type parameter, and I will just end it with something, maybe I'll give a return of 0. Return 0. Alright, so this is now my bare minimum program which I have, and now just for fun let me just add a counter which is going to count till some number. So I'll add a int type counter, and now since we are not going to use any compiler optimization, and this is telling me that we are not using that variable, so I think I mentioned something about compiler optimization. If I do not do anything with this and I just initialize this, probably the compiler is not going to assemble it into the assembly code. So then in that case we are not going to get the count variable in our assembly stack. So just in order to avoid that, I can do one thing is I'm going to call it as an int8, and maybe I'll just going to use this function just to count. So I'll just initialize it by count equals to 0, and then I'll increase the count. Alright, so what it does is it is just going to change the value of count from 0 to 1. Okay, good enough for us. And I have set the value of int, and if you want to see what is the size of int, you can always go into the Keel website, and I think I have shared the link to the variable sizes, so you can get it. But by default int is going to be 16 bits, but if you want to get a specific bit size for int, you can just call in include the GPIO, or maybe the int standard int library, which is the stdint.h. Alright. So if you import this, then you can use the uint8 or unsigned int 8 underscore t, which is the 8-bit integer type, function. So what will happen here, if you just copy this count variable multiple times, it is just going to count it in number of times. And if you just put it inside a while loop, when we talk about branching and things like that, we'll be talking about while loops. So it is going to loop it around until it reached the value of 8 bits of integer, which is 2 to the power 8, and 2 to the power 8 is 255, 0 to 255, and it is then going to return to your previous address. Alright, so I will just save this and I will go to build. But before building, I told you that in options for your particular project, source group 1, I will go to the options for source group 1, and I see an option for optimization over here. I'll set it to optimization level 0, and this is required because we are not really doing any kind of big stuff over here. We're not playing around with the internals of this, so it is basically going to ignore this when it is compiling. So maybe we won't be able to access this in the assembly part. So I will set the optimization level to 0. I'll set it okay. I'll do a save, and then I go to debug. I'll start and stop the debug session, but it shows that it's not going to find a device over here. So I need to set a debug setting over here. For doing that, I will go to my target options, and in my debug I'll set it as simulator, and I also mentioned that you need to have an initialization file. I think I missed out sharing that initialization file, but this is basically allows you to access certain areas of the memory location. So if you see what's inside this, it is going to allow this to be a readable and a writable region. Alright, so I'll click on OK. I'll close this. Okay, so I save this and then I build it now again, and once you build this, it shows that there is one warning, probably because of the optimization that we used, but for our purpose that's not going to be an issue. So it does not show me any error, so I can go ahead with the debugging. So I'll click on debug over here. Okay, so so it took me to my startup file, and you can see that it is going to load the data which is there in your register R0. Now just to tell you a few more things about this area where you can see everything, where all these things are going around. And mind you, whatever I have declared over here in my main.c, it's a local variable. I hope most of you know what is a local and a global variable. Over here I have a local variable, so if you want to see what is there the value of locals, you can see the call stacks and locals through this location. And once you get into the main.c file, once the program comes over there, it's over here right now. Once it comes over there, it is going to get into my it is going to show me the value of the locals that I'm using. I'll just step out of this, and then I want to come maybe over here. Alright, so I'll just step over here. Okay, so here you can see that I have the local variable called count. It has the value 0. If you want to, this is in hexadecimal. If you want to see it in different format, I think you can set it from here. Otherwise you can also access the memory location. So over here you have the data store B, you have the command store B, and what it is doing is going to store the value R0, store the store the value in location R0, which is register 0, and it is going to it is going to store the value of the stack pointer offsetted by 3 places. Okay, so I get into this, then I count it, and you can see that the value of count is increasing. Alright, so if I go before this, since we were talking about the startup file, you saw that these are the programs that were executed before it entered into your main function. So I'm not going to very much detail because we are learning about making applications for this. But if you were hacking and playing around with the embedded ecosystem on the bare metal platform, you would also want to optimize your startup sequence. So maybe you could do something like write your own startup file for your particular chip. You can always refer to what is there over here, but you could do it that way, so that you can just maybe set a few things. Maybe if you want a low power application, so you could just turn off everything and set whatever you want. But generally people who are developing embedded applications don't do that. They just play around with the main application that they want. Alright, so you can see the count variable is increasing as you go ahead, and if I go to the next, you can see that the value has increased. again what it is doing, it is doing load, add and store. So for doing this, it is loading the data in from a stack pointer offsetted by 3. So my stack pointer over here is 658, and if you want to see where it is, you can go to the memory location, you can add this address. So it is hexadecimal 0800 and then you have 2 and then you have offset of 3, so 2 plus 3 is 5. Okay, so now you see again I would like to mention a few things. This ARM Cortex microcontroller stores the data in a little endian format, and if you know what is little endian and big endian, if you have a 32-bit data, since we are only dealing with 8-bit data, it's not going to be a problem. But since your memory is byte addressed, I think I mentioned in my one of the slide that the memory is going to be byte addressed. So each address that you see here corresponds to a byte of memory. But if you want to store something which is a 32-bit variable, so let's say if you have uint 32t, then in that case you will have to occupy 4 bytes, right? And in that case, what it's going to do, it is going to set the lowest of those 4 bytes to the lowest memory address. So if you have 4 bytes, say if you have something like uint 32t and you have a variable inside that, so what it is going to do, it is going to store the smallest byte which is the bits 0 through 7 to the lowest location. So if it occupies a location 565, 567, 566, 67 and 68, then the bits at location bits 0 to 7 will be stored in 65. Then after that it is going to store 8 to 15 in 67, and so on and so forth. And again, the data that you see here, these two pairs correspond to 1 byte. So if you see that this hexadecimal format, if you see, then each byte is capable, each hexadecimal digit is capable of storing 4 bits, correct? Because you can go from 0 to 15. So 0 to 15 is 2 to the power that is a total of 16 characters, and that is 2 to the power 4, so 4 bits over here. So 4 bits in the first one, 4 bits in the second one, so you have 2 bits over here. So each bit, each of these two hexes, if I told 2 bits, that's my mistake, each of these bit sequences are basically one memory location. So if this is 65, this is going to be 66, this is going to be 67, and this is going to be 68. All right, so let's see what's my program counter. It's 562 and the location over here is 565, right? So if I increase the count, and if I want to see, now if you want to see both of these together, you can just dock it along. Maybe I want to dock it over here on the left side. Okay, so now you can see both your memory as well as your location that are shown over here. So my program counter is 562. Sorry, my stack pointer is 658. Okay, I did a mistake over here. I want to go to the stack pointer. Stack pointer is 200000658. So I will write over here 200000658, 200000658. And if I go over there, in fact you can see 658 is this location, then you have 659, 659 will be then 65A, and then 65A, if you add another 1 bit, then that will be 65B. So this 65B is indeed having the value of hexadecimal 2. If I just step again, you will see that the location, the data in this particular address is increased by 2 bits. So if I just step it again, in fact it has increased to 3, again it has increased to 4. All right, so this is how you can analyze and diagnose. What we are doing right now is called debugging. This is how we are going to debug your code, by seeing what is there in your registers, by seeing what is there in your variables. And it may not come down to this that you have to look into the registers, but your variables are very important, because you are going to work on the higher level code. You are going to call in data from some particular device, maybe a UART device, through your Bluetooth protocol or some other protocol, and you're going to store it in a cell inside your local variable. You're not going to store it in a register, you're going to store it in a local variable. Of course that local variable is going to be stored in a memory location, but then you are going to access it through the variable over here. All right, so I hope till here it is clear. because next is interrupts, and we might want to have this part clear before we get into interrupts. So if any question, just speak out. I'm all ears. I see no questions over here. Okay, so I assume all clear. So let's just move ahead with this.
So, one question.
All right, please ask.
So, why there are multiple count plus plus statements? Means what is the purpose of multiple count plus plus?
This is
One count
a
plus plus will do for the counter.
yeah. I'm not doing a while counter. This is just to demonstrate. You do not see a loop over here, right? If I had added a loop, then one count should have been enough. The main purpose was just to increase the value of count. It's just for demonstration. This is not a good code. Did
Yes,
I
sir.
did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, great. So now moving on, let me get back to my presentation. Okay, so we have seen how starting from we haven't done it on the hardware, so reset button and adding power does not really make sense. But then we saw that the processor is determined at boot mode. All of that is going on in the background. We started from this point. It loaded the address of the main stack pointer from this location, and that was 0x, that is hexadecimal 020000, and then from there it loaded the program counter address, which was the address of the main function, and then it went ahead and started the program. Okay, all right, so now we are going to talk about interrupts. What is an interrupt? If any one of you are familiar, can you please just raise your hands? What is an interrupt? Do you have any idea of interrupts?
So it is for stopping the current process for the time being
All right, that's
and continuing with the process we are giving it, and then after completing that process, we will switch to the previous process.
all right. That's a very concise and brief description. I would accept that. Anyone else has anything to add to that? You can just raise your hands. Mm. All right. I don't see any hands, so just let me continue with what I'm doing. All right. So interrupts, as one of you just mentioned, is a way of stopping or pausing basically your execution of the main code, and then you are going to execute a different code segment. In some cases, you call that routine, and that once that routine is completed, you can switch on to your primary task. So ARM Cortex M has a very powerful interrupt management unit, and that is basically called a nested vector interrupt controller. And this nested vector interrupt controller is basically a system of hierarchy of your vector interrupts or your interrupts, which are then vectorized into the particular values or the priority value that they hold. So basically, when we are talking about hardware management, it is all about dealing with asynchronous events. You do not know whenever you are going to get the value from a sensor. Maybe if you have set it in a periodic way that you only get it after X number of times, that's possible. But in some cases, like if you're designing a car, and if you are designing a system, when it detects something in front, if you have a range sensor and ultrasonic sensor, if it detects something in the front and you want it to stop immediately, you want to do it in such a way that your other functions that are going on, maybe there is a routine check of your fuel injection and all those things are paused or stopped, and then you execute your main code, or the code which is there in the interrupt. Maybe in this case it could be activating your anti-lock braking system or just putting the brakes automatically. or maybe just displaying an error message or a warning message in front of your screen. So over here we are basically going to anticipate or maybe unanticipate, or basically we are not going to anticipate what is the data that is going to come. It's all about dealing with asynchronous events, and most of these comes from hardware peripherals. So for example, if we are reaching a configured period value, the UART is going to warn us about the arrival of data. And so UART is primarily a data protocol, data communication protocol. If you are familiar with the HC05 Bluetooth module, which is very popular with the Arduino system, it uses the USART or the UART data. And when you're talking also about serial USB, many devices use the UART protocol for doing that. Alright, so others may be also originated by outside of the board. So if you want to happen very intentionally, so like if you want to press a button and you want that to interrupt your program, you can program that in that way. And then you want to maybe have an end stop switch if you are building something like a 3D printer, and you want something that is going to stop your program if it finds that one of your temperature sensor has failed and it can cause a fire. You can make that happen using interrupts. So we have a feature called interrupts, and it is just an asynchronous event that is going to stop the execution of the current code on a priority basis, to sum it up basically. And the more important the interrupt is, the higher is its priority. And on the left side, on the left side of the screen, you can see the numbers 1 through 15 and then 16 and so on. So those tell you the basically the priority as defined by the manufacturer, and then you have the user priority. Alright, so the higher the priority is, the more important the interrupt is, or the vice versa of that. Basically, the more important the interrupt is, the higher it is priority. Higher is a rankable term. So if you have a rank of -3, that has a higher priority than something that has a rank of 1. So all of this is going to cause a lower priority interrupt. So if you have multiple interrupts, say if you have a switch, and then if you have a button, and then if you have maybe a microphone input, you could have a hierarchy of interrupts. So one of your microphones is connected to your ADC channels, and then one of the interrupts is connected to your GPIO, one is connected through UART. So you can apply a hierarchy in your code so that one of the interrupts can even interrupt the other interrupt. You can also keep them on the same level, or you could keep them in a different level, so that whatever interrupt you want to be more important is going to do that. So the code and the code that services that interrupt is called the interrupt service routine, or the ISR. And when we dive into the HAL system, we will be talking about interrupts over there in practical, in fact. Okay. So it is basically a source of multi-programming. Remember, I mentioned in one of my earlier lectures that your microprocessor is always going to run in a serial fashion. So whatever code it is doing, since it's only having one core, it is always going to do it in a serial way. You have microprocessors that have multiple cores that do it parallelly or maybe pseudo parallelly. But if all of your if your code is dependent, so if you have a code like a counter, until and unless you count to 1, you cannot anticipate the counting of 2, right? If you have a counter that is incrementing by 1 on each iteration, if you want a value of 3 after 3 iteration, then it has to go through that loop. So similarly, basically interrupt is a source of multiple programming or multi-programming. So while it is counting, maybe counting takes some number of cycles. So while it is doing the count, you can run something else so that one thing is happening in the background, or maybe there is a wait for something. By the time you can do something else. Okay, so it is also a way of multi-programming. It is also a way of avoiding errors or causing crash, causing fault exception handling, and other unwanted condition handling basically. So so basically they are exploited by real-time operating systems, very importantly, so that real-time operating system, you need to have a good idea of how your code is executing and how many cycles are going on. So all of that is being set, and all of that is being taken care of by your interrupts and your interrupt routine. Without the help by hardware, it is impossible to have a true preemptive system. So you cannot preempt something without having this particular system in place, which is your interrupt service routine. And then this is not going to, if you do not have this in your hardware, it is not going to allow you to switch between different code contexts without irreparably using the current execution flow. So then we can see that hardware can originate in both ways. You can have software interrupts, and all of that, it depends upon the exception type that you are seeing, or the interrupt type that you are seeing. And I'm going to use the term interrupts and exceptions interchangeably over here. In ARM, basically interrupt is also a type of exception. So ARM is going to distinguish into two types of interrupts, some that originate by hardware and the other that originate by software. And software could be a fault where you are accessing out of bound memory. So over here, if you have something like that, in general programming terms, you could call that an exception. But in this, it is going to invoke an interrupt. An exception is going to invoke an interrupt when it happens in the software. Alright, so Cortex-M processors provide a dedicated exception management unit, and this is called your Nested Vector Interrupt Controller, or the NVIC. And the thing that you see on the screen is basically a table which defines the priority of all these different interrupts. And we are all going to talk about that. So we are only going to deal with interrupt management. Exception handling and all, we will be talking in some other session when we actually come across exception. So when we talk about the nested vector interrupt controller, you can see the block diagram of that inside on my screen over here. So it is a dedicated hardware unit inside your Cortex-M microcontroller, and just to prove that, I have the data sheet over here of this open in front of me, and you have this interrupts that has a nested vector interrupt controller, which is going to set that. I also showed you a block diagram of the microcontroller, and it basically showed the different regions that we have inside a microcontroller. That was more like an architecture kind of thing. But you basically, the Cortex M3 is going to have your nested vector interrupt controller inside it. So we were talking about the NVIC controller. So basically there is a dedicated hardware unit, and the diagram is showing you the relation between the NVIC unit, the processor core, and the peripherals. We have to distinguish between the two types of peripherals. The ones those that are external to Cortex-M core but internal to STM32 MCU. Now again, here peripherals is the term used to talk about anything that is not a part of your arithmetic logical unit or the part of the Cortex-M core. All right. So peripherals are all those things that are not required to compute something. Peripherals could be your maybe your UART inputs, your SPI inputs, any kind of GPIOs, or any kind of data communication protocols that you have there, or the units that are there set inside your chip, which may be provided by your vendor. Okay, so we have to distinguish between these two peripherals. Some are provided by Cortex-M core and are internal to STM32 MCU, and there are certain that are external to the MCU. So something like a button on the outside could be a GPIO port access, which is an external interrupt triggering device. The source of these interrupts may be basically used to drive an external advanced peripheral as well. Now a dedicated programmable controller, which is called the external interrupt or the event controller, the EXTI that you see on my left, is going to handle all those interrupts. The second kind of interrupt which I told you, the external interrupts. It is responsible for interconnection between an external IO signal as well as the NVIC controller. So then, as we told before, ARM is going to distinguish between the two exceptions, which is going to originate inside the CPU and some coming from the external peripherals. So these are also called interrupt requests and Programs that manage the exception through this use a specific ISRs, interrupt service routines, basically, which are coded at a higher level. Higher level as in whatever you are going to code in C. That is how you are going to access these interrupts. So the processor is going to know where to locate these routines. That is all because of this table that is there. And this is a generic table that I show you, but each hardware or each chip is going to have a specific interrupt service routine built inside it. So there are basically these are the main 13 or 15 kinds of interrupts that you see. I won't get into much detail, but just to run through what is it. Reset is basically as soon as the CPU resets or CPU starts. So we saw how the startup is happening. It always starts with the reset. So anytime something happens in your CPU, you may want to reset it, or if you want to just start it in general, you are going to use the reset handler, and the reset is an exception that is going to be raised as soon as the CPU is reset. It is the entry point of running the firmware, basically. Then you have the NMI. NMI stands for non-maskable interrupt. This is a special kind of exception which has the highest priority, obviously after the reset, because reset has to have the highest priority because that is your entry point. So like the reset exception, it cannot be masked, or it cannot be stopped or interrupted by the other interrupt, or it also cannot be disabled. It can be associated to critical and non-deferrable activities. So certain activities like setting the clock speed and clock speed of your core and those things, maybe those things can be done by the this particular exception or this particular interrupt. This is in STM microelectronics, ST microcontrollers. These are generally linked to the clock security system. It is a self-diagnosis peripheral that details the failure of the high-speed enable bus or the HSE bus. HSE is basically a bus. If you see the architecture diagram, you have two buses, HSE and HSI, high-speed enable and high-speed interrupt. So basically, if this is going to happen, HSE is going to be automatically disabled, which also means the internal HSI is also going to be enabled, and the non-maskable interrupt is raised to inform the software that something is wrong with the high-speed enable bus. We will be talking about this when we talk about the GPIO buses and how to access the GPIO. In fact, in tomorrow's and day after tomorrow's lesson, we are going to talk all about GPIOs. Then you have the hard fault, and it is basically a generic fault exception. It is generally related to software interrupt. Whenever there is some kind of fault, one very good or basically important kind of fault is maybe when there is going to be a bus fault, or sorry, bus fault is a separate exception. Whenever there is going to be a code error, there is maybe something like a divide by zero error, which is not done by a compiler. If you have set the optimization level to 0, there is going to be a hard fault inside it. Of course, to get out the hard fault, you have to fix the code or just do a reset. Again, reset has the highest priority. Whenever in doubt, just reset. Okay, then you have the memory management fault, and this generally is going to happen when we try to access a non-usable or an illegal location. So if you have a memory capacity of 64 kilobytes, and if you want to access the 65th kilobyte, then it's going to throw a memory management exception. Or if it is there, if you are trying to access something which does not have a read or write permission, again there's going to be a memory management fault. Next you have the bus fault, and it is going to occur whenever there is a advanced high speed bus interface is going to receive an error as a response from a bus slave, or it is also called a prefetch abort. It is basically a prefetch fault, and it can also happen because of a memory access fault or any other kind of memory or address related issues. Then you have the usage fault. It occurs when there is a program error such as an illegal instruction or an alignment problem, and or an attempt to access a non-existing coprocessor. So in some ST microelectronic chips, you have a coprocessor. So you have a main higher capacity processor doing for higher level stuff, like maybe you have something like an ML application or a camera or a graphics related application. Those things are handled by a higher core or higher processor capacity CPU, and then you do the lower level tasks such as the memory management and if you have some GPIO ports, something like a USB management, those things are going to be in the coprocessor. So you could have a M7 core as well as an M4 core in the same chip. So that is basically a coprocessor. If you attempt to access a non-existing coprocessor, so if you want to access to M0 from something that does not have an M0, a USS fault is going to be occurring. Then we have the SVC call, and this is not really a fault condition. It is generally raised when the supervisor call is instructed, and this is generally used by real-time operating systems to execute instruction in a privileged state. So if you want to execute a task giving a privilege operations that you want, and you want operations to execute the SVC instruction, and the OS is going to perform the requested operation. SVC is supervisor call over here. So then it is going to have the same behavior of the system call as is there in the other operating system. Next is the debug monitor, and then you see that debug monitor is having a very high exception priority. Now this is required, again we haven't really reached the stage where we are going to talk about GPIO interrupt or the user interrupt, and you want the debug monitor to have the priority higher, because if you debug is a protocol that is going to be used in order to see what is going on inside, right? You need to see what is there in your memory, what is there in your registers, before you are going to start something like something which may be raised by an interrupt. So you want the debug monitor to have a higher priority above your any other kind of interrupt. When we are doing debug over here in Keil, we are doing it in software or in simulation mode, but when you do it on hardware, the device is going to invoke a debug process. Like we have to cycle through, and we have an option to run and stop the code. All those are done by interrupts over here, and that is basically handled by the debug interrupt. Next we have the pend SV. We have this is basically an exception related to, again, our real-time operating system. This is not going to execute immediately. It can also be delayed. So this also allows the RTOS to complete tasks with a higher priority. Now the final one is the SysTick, and this is a very important interrupt. This is also related to RTOS devices, but in general when we are going to use functions such as the delay function, this function is basically going to be used. Now if you know the notation that whenever you are going to use delay, your processor is going to just sit there and do nothing at all. This is how you can use that time whenever you're doing a delay, maybe doing a blink, you do a delay, right? So you can use the crucial time to do other tasks. So you just want to blink, start the blink, do a delay, that delay is happening in the background, and then you can perform it in such a way that you, while doing the blink, you can also do other computation tasks as well, so that your code, instead of being appearing to be a serial, then it can also look like happening in the parallel. Okay, so now the remaining exceptions that are there, 16 through 47 or 240 depending on the MCU that you have. Cortex M0 and M0 Plus core allow up to 32 interrupts, while Cortex M3, M4, M7, we are using M3. These are going to allow us a total of 240 interrupts. These 240 interrupts all depend on the kind of and the size of the GPIO or the number of GPIO that you have. Where you can find the list that you have, basically this is going to be present in the nested vector interrupt controller of the programming manual. So if I go to interrupts and events, I can see the NVIC controller, and you can find all these interrupts, their particular position and their priority. You have this watchdog timer, you have the PVD line, external interrupt detection, RTC, external interrupt 1, 2, so on and so forth. Then you have the USART interrupt, SPI interrupt, DMA interrupt. So all these things have a particular priority setup, and you can have a user priority. You can set the user priority and access these in a way you want. You can just refer to this user manual. How you get this user manual? You just go to Keil. I'll just stop this debug. You go to Keil, you go to books, you see 3 data books. The first one is your data sheet, which is going to tell you your physical characteristics. Next you have the reference manual. So this was the reference manual that we were referring to. This is, I called it a user manual, but it's more of a reference manual for programming. All right. So this was a small introduction to interrupts. Any questions over here? कुछ क्वेश्चन नहीं कि सब ऊपर से पार हो गया?
सर ये जो कॉन्फ़िगरेबल लिखा हुआ है इसका मतलब सर कैसे कॉन्फ़िगर करना है इसको?
I'll be
How are
showing
we?
that to you. कैसे आप कॉन्फ़िगर कर सकते हो? Whenever you are talking about real-time operating systems, you are actually going to do this configuration. Configuration as in you are going to set the priority of this particular interrupt. So I'll be showing you one example right now in CubeID how to set the interrupt and how to set the priority of that.
Okay, sir.
Any other questions related to theory of interrupts basically? कहीं पे भी डाउट है? Alright, so ये part थोड़ा boring था, that is why I ran in a hurry over here. But if you want to see what is there in interrupts, I will share a link of the forum where it is going to tell you all about interrupts over there. And of course, if you access the data sheets and the programming manuals of this or the reference manual that I am showing you, then in that case it tells you all about interrupts. Basically that is how I learned. I just went through the data sheets and all the data is there inside there. Okay, so just to give you a small demo of how we set the interrupts, I am not going to demonstrate this because I do not have a board connected, but how to set the interrupts and how to work around with the interrupts, I will be just doing that. So this is the CubeID, all of you are familiar with this. I will be going to my IOC file, which is the CubeMX perspective file, which is there to set all your different GPIO pins and all. So I'll click on this and it is going to load that. It might take some time. Alright, so while it's doing that, one thing I might have missed out over here, excuse me. So this is basically your vector table in STM32, and if we talk about this, you are going to see how the vector table is organized in the memory. Of course, all of this has to be in the memory. That is how you are going to set the hierarchy and the priority. The entry 0 of this array is the address of the main stack pointer or the MSP, the one that you see in the lowest part. Address hexadecimal 080000000, and this is the address of the main stack pointer, which is there in your SRAM or the static RAM, which is basically storage, or we could also call it flash in this case. Usually this is the address that is corresponding to the end of the SRAM, and as in the beginning point, and in the opposite way we are using this term. Okay, and that is the base address plus its size. So starting from the second entry of this table, we can find that all these exceptions and the interrupt handlers are present. So you see the reset handler, NMI handler. I told you whenever it starts, it is going to get into the main stack pointer, right? And main stack pointer is going to pull to the main stack. But in case some kind of interrupt is invoked, it is going to go to the particular interrupt, and you want this to be starting at the starting point. Mind you, this access 0 cross 0 0 0 0 0 0, it has been aliased to a different region, which is over here. So if you want to access these, you will be actually going to entering these address numbers. If you try to access this is going to show an error, and it is going to tell you that you cannot access it. I mentioned over here it is going to fetch the address of main stack pointer, but really it is what it's doing is going to call the address 0800000000. This is the location of your main stack pointer. Alright, so now we can see all these exceptions from the second entry. This means that the vector table has a length of equal to 48 for Cortex M0 and M0 plus base microcontroller, and it will have a length equal to 256 for M3, M4, M7. In our case we are using an M3, so the size of this table over here is going to be 256 bytes basically. It is all holding the addresses, right? These are not data, these are all addresses. These all map to different routines which are handled by this. So you could have an address of the memory location which has the code for reset handler, then you have an address which is going to start for the location of the NMI handler, and so on and so forth. Alright. It is again important to clarify something about the vector table. The name of the extension handler is just a convention. You can always rename them, of course, except the ones that you are seeing over here, the ones that are internal. But the CubeMX software that we are dealing is designed to generate ISR with these names only. The ones that you see in the programming manual are going to be the names of the exception handlers that is going to be made. So if I come back to the IDE, now I'll just continue. Excuse me. All right. So you see this GPIO handler. I have this GPIO set as an output. Now, if I want to set an input over here, so I just want to set it as an input, and I'll set it as a input pin over here. Now, if I go to the NVIC, you see over here I have my system view, and inside that I have these DMA, GPIO, and NVIC. GPIO is your general purpose input output. Then you have the nested vector interrupt controller. So if I click on this, you can see all of these things that are enabled. You have the NMI, you have the hard fault interrupt, and I think one of you asked how are you going to set the priority and how are you going to change that. This is how you do that. You can enable this from here, you can disable this, you can have set the priority of preemption and all. When you are getting into real-time operating system, you will learn that preemptive programming and pipelining and all those things are going to come into picture. But so you can do all of this. You can, if you close the debug monitor, and once you do that, you won't be able to call the debug routine. It will show an exception whenever you're going to do that. Okay. All right. So now over here, I just set a GPIO pin, and I haven't set anything to that. So if I want to set it as an interrupt, I will be setting it the GPIO pin mode to a GPIO external interrupt EXTI 14. And GPIO EXTI 14, once you do that, it is now going to, when you go to into the NVIC, the nested vector interrupt controller, you can see that external interrupt is going to be set over here. If you enable this, you can set the priority of this as you want, and you can also set the sub priority. So once you do this, I will be setting the priority to 0. The lower the number over here, the higher the priority is. All of these have the same priority. So if any of these happen at a time, or whichever is first in the stack is going to be accessed. But I want this to be second in the line, so I have to set the priority to 2. Alright, I just save this, and once you save this, it is now going to add a new line of code inside your main.c. It is also going to initialize this as a general GPIO input pin, and it is then also going to set it as a interrupt. So I did this, and I have the PC14 pin that I just set, and it was set to an interrupt pin. So it is basically an input pin, because you're going your input is going to trigger an interrupt. But once you do this interrupt, once you pull this up to high, it is going to invoke an interrupt. How does this do that? It is then going to call the interrupt routine. And where do you see these routines or the programs, what happens during interrupt? You go into your core, you go into your source code, and you see this file called stm32f1xx.it. This is your interrupt code. This is your HAL abstraction for the interrupt file. Alright, so over here you can see the NMI handler. Whenever you want to invoke an NMI handler, if you want to do something, maybe whenever this code is called, I want to initiate a variable called int c, and then I just want to keep on adding c, and that is all I want to do. You can do it over here. The handler is over here. Basically, this is the routine which is happening on invoking an interrupt. I won't want to mess around with this, so I'll just leave it as is. Alright, so over here I just made a interrupt which I called ext1510 IRQ handler, which is basically my if you go over here, this was my external interrupt 14. No, sorry, I have my 15 pin over here. So this has called the GPIO pin 14. Okay, the interrupt handler number is the name of the interrupt is EXTI15, but this has been going to be accessed by pin 14. Now, how do you know which pin is going to initiate which interrupt? You can do that, see that through your vector table over here. So I was looking at EXTI EXTI4, sorry, it's not the 14, it's I4, so I messed up over there. But basically this is EXTI4, and this is going to access it from here. So 10 to 15 is the port number, and so these interrupts are all multiplexed. So you have to call in case of GPIO, if you have 4 ports, all of those ports are going to be connected to a certain interrupt controller. So then line 3 and line 4 are going to be accessed in that way. Alright, so over here my EXTI 1510, the external 1510 interrupt is at this particular location. In general, the position is this and the priority is 47, but we just change the priority to 1 over there because I do not have any of these interrupts over here. So that is how you play around with interrupts in your code. And then what it's going to do this, it is going to call this function called GPIO external interrupt handler, EXTI interrupt handler, and if I go to the declaration of this, this is what is going to happen inside this. The HAL GPIO pin, how it is going to invoke when it sees something over here, it is going to invoke this, and what is going to happen then you have to define it over here. You can start your code over here. Okay, when this button is pressed you can do something, and once this is done you can go back. So interrupt is basically, you can also do this in general programming. You can just set an if else condition, but over here what you're doing is you are stopping all the other thing, you're doing this, and then you are going to start and do back whatever you're doing earlier. Alright, so any doubts in this way of initializing a interrupt in GPIO? Again, you can do this for anything. You can do this for if you have something like connectivity, if you have USART. So if you want to enable USART 1, you can just enable it as an asynchronous, and you can set it as an interrupt. You can have a global interrupt over here, and once you go back to your main NVIC over here, you can see that you have another USART interrupt, and if you go to the table you can see that USART 1 has a interrupt priority which is in fact higher than of EXTI line 1. But if you want to change that, if you want to set it as a lower priority, you can do that as well. Alright, so any doubts, any questions? You can just raise up your hands.
So one thing, sir. Sir, can you show any example of how interrupts are being used in this STM32?
I do not have a hardware connected with me. I will be sharing a video of that, doing that shortly. I just wanted to go through this interrupt before I share that video. I will be demonstrating this on hardware. I do not have time. I think we are already 8:15 and I have a lot to tell you right now. So I will not be doing it right now, but I'll be sharing the video. And if you still have any problems and if you are really interested in interrupts, you can just drop me a message. Maybe I could help you out in doing that. All right.
Okay, sir.
All right, great. Any other doubts or questions over here? All right, cool. So back to the presentation. All right, so we see in the vector table inside this. So next, this is for your assignment basically. Till here we were all just talking about the previous week. This is for your assignment. Now this assignment is for the week 2 assignment, but you have to submit it by basically the deadline is 11/2/2021, and the objective I'll be telling you in a bit. But we will be talking about bare metal programming. Now what is bare metal programming? In general, we have talked about programming using the HAL abstraction. So we were just setting the pins to high and setting the pins to low and so on and so forth. But that was all using a graphical user interface, and we were using the HAL libraries for doing that. But if you are working with something like a real-time system or a real-time operating system, these abstractions can cause hindrance and some kind of delay inside your code. Delay as in the delay in processing, because you have some layers of abstraction that is happening. So most of these abstraction are taken care of by the compiler, but there is still some overhead when you are calling this through an abstracted version of this. So if you are calling some variable and storing that variable somewhere for invoking a pin, maybe that has some overhead to the processing on the CPU side. So in order to avoid that, we can also set all of this. So if you wanted to set this pin, I think I mentioned that whenever you're doing this, this is basically going to include these lines of code inside your main file, and what this does is basically set the pin number it is going to set the pin mode, it is going to set a pin up type, and this is going to set the frequency of this. So these things can be done manually. And how do you do that? That is what the bare metal programming is. Now I am going to show you a small code snippet today that we work in bare metal programming with, and I'll compile it. You guys have to basically make a program that uses the bare metal programming theory, and you have to so I'll be showing you a Blink code, but you have to make a program in which you get the input from somewhere, and in reaction to that input you set a output somewhere. So if you get a button press input, you have to set it as a you have to set the particular outputs. How are you going to check it without a hardware? You are going to change the value in registers manually and see the reaction of that through your code. So I think I have shown you how you can access the registers through the debugging. I think none of you have any problems over there. So in today's now in this project, I will be going to the project which I have made for your no-hal project, which I call it, or this is basically an unabstracted project. Just a minute, I just Alright, some technical glitches. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, so I hope you guys can see my screen now. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Alright, okay, great. So this is the program. This is I have called it Blink No Hal. This is not going to use a HAL abstraction, and we are going to use the register setting and the register mapping in order to do this setting. I hope all of you can bear me for another 15 or 20 minutes. This is very important for your assignment, so please pay attention to whatever I am telling right now. All right. So I made this program as a generic program. Whatever steps I showed you for making a programming key, you are going to do that. Now next, what you're going to do is going to include the STM32F10x.h. This is basically your device header. All right. So device header is going to import the header files or the registers which are there for your particular device. I am using F103, but it turns out all the devices that have the prefix F10 are going to have the same header file. So what is there in this header file? If I click on this and if I go to open this document, it is going to open this. So if you see the description of this, it is basically a peripheral access layer header file, and peripherals are all your GPIO peripherals and all those things that you're going to use as a programmer. It contains all the registers definition, bit definition, memory mapping, and also all these different devices that are there for F10 series. This is a unique include file, which is basically this has been optimized for you to understand and for you to import. It is very well commented file. So earlier back in the day, people used to since there was no MX and all, this is how you used to set the value of pin as input and output. And on a rudimentary level, your IDE, the MX that we saw, is also doing something like this. Of course you have the HAL abstraction, but then it is basically doing that in an automated way. Alright, so back to the PPT. Alright, so in order to toggle an LED, we are first going to enable the peripheral bus. What is the peripheral bus? I will come back to my data sheet. Here's my data sheet. Alright, so here's my data sheet, and so in this I want to say start a LED which is or blink an LED which is there at the pin number C, port C, pin 13, GPIO C, pin 13, C13. So here you see that this is connected to your APB2 or the advanced peripheral bus 2. Alright, and you have a maximum frequency of 48 or 72 megahertz depending on the source of input that you are getting. So the first step of doing this is to enable the peripheral bus, and peripheral bus is basically your APB2. Next, you are going to provide power to the bus, because since these are all low power devices, ARM has optimized, or maybe ST has optimized to be powered off by default. So if you connect anything to a non-powered pin, probably nothing is going to happen. You're not going to get any kind of inputs or output. So we are then going to provide the power to the bus. Then you are going to set the clock prescalers. And just to tell you what is clock prescalers, we had discussed or I showed you a small snippet of these clock cycles. So what are prescalers? If you know about phase lock loops, you know that it is a device which is used to upscale or downscale any kind of clock or the frequency circuit in a very precise manner. So if you have an input of say 8 megahertz, you can easily scale it up to 72 megahertz by the use of a phase lock loop. It is a frequency multiplier, if you will, in this particular case at least. So whenever you are using the Cube MX perspective, you are going to set the prescalers values over here, right? You have the prescaler numbers over here on the left, and accordingly you are going to set the value of the core. So these prescalers have to be set manually. Since we are not going to use this in my example, I want to set this manually. Alright, so next you do the set the prescalers, you select the clock, and you want to select the clock source for your AHB. And in if you go to datasheet, again always keep the datasheet and the reference manual handy. And so if you want to give clock to this, you want to see which is the nearest clock which is coming to this. So I can see I have the timer 1 which can provide me a clock source to this. So or you can just get the clock source from this, and you can always refer to your this particular manual or this MX code, and here you see that the clock is being provided by my HSC, or the APB2 is being provided by PCLK2, and you want to set the prescaler of PCLK2 in such a way. So this map is also available in your data sheet as well as your reference manual, so you can refer to that whenever you want to set this. I just showed you one example for one particular port and one particular device. The same is easily scalable and easily replicable on any other device. Just you have to figure out which is the correct pin, correct port, correct registers, that all. So then you provide clock to the clock input pin to the GPIO port that you want to set, and then you set the pin mode to output. After you set that mode to output, you set the configuration, and then you set and reset the pin in the appropriate manner to just turn it on and turn it off. And then you add a delay function if you want to do something like toggling and blinking an LED. Alright, so next we are going to see where are these registers located and how are you going to access these registers. So now if I go back to my programming manual, remember how I accessed this. I went to my project in Keel and I accessed it from my device data book. So over here you can see the reference manual is there. Your reference manual is your cheat sheet. You always keep it handy whenever you're working with any processor or any kind of chip in an ARM microcontroller. All vendors, whichever you buy a processor from, is always going to provide you with the reference manual. That is how people used to program the chips in the earlier days. Now you have the internet, but that's how it was used to be done. Anyway, so I enable the HSC and I wait for it to become ready. How do I do that? Now the high speed enable clock HSC is going to be present in the RCC register. Now which is the RCC register? If I go back to my programming manual, you can see that in fact I have all these reset and clock control registers. So I have all these register data present over here. So reset, it is going to show you how a reset is happening. Then all these clocks are going to be shown how these clocks are happening, and finally you have the list of registers. Okay, so you have the clock register. How are you going to access that clock control register on your code? Now this is very synonymous and very replicable on your device, so on your particular chip in code. So if I see this RCC register, the naming scheme has been set in your device header file, which is the STM32F106.h. If you go inside this, if you want to see where is this, what is this register, I will just look up RCC, and RCC is basically the register section, and RCC has all these registers. So RCC register, inside that RCC registers you have the clock register, and next you have the configuration register, and so on and so forth. So all these different registers, you have the CIR, the clock interrupt register, used by interrupts and all. So these are all set in structs. Alright, so that is how they have structured it. You have the RCC register set, which is the name of your struct, and then you have the name of the particular register, which is the element or the holder or the placeholder inside your struct. So we were talking about RCC, so I'll just find over here control F, I just find RCC. Alright, so I find the RCC over here, and you can see that RCC is the type def or the name of the struct. So RCC type def is going to have the CR register, which is your clock register. Next you have the configuration register, APB1, APB2, APB AHB enable, APB2 enable, APB1 enable, so on and so forth. So like we were seeing in our program, first I will be enabling the HSE and waiting for the HSE to become ready. How do you enable the HSE? You just call this, or this, or basically you are going to set it. You're going to set the CR register with the value which is there in the RCC CR HSE on. Again, this is using a macro. So if I click on this, if I go to the definition of this, I can see the macro over here, RCC HSE on. It has the value hexadecimal 0001 0000. And what is this basically? If you want to see what is the value of this in binary, it will all come, all the picture will become clear. So I will open my calculator. Alright, so over here in calculator, I'll go to my programmer calculator, and I have the value in hexadecimal. And in hexadecimal, if I enter this value, I am seeing 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 19 11 12 13 14 15 16. Okay, so the 16th place over here, if you start from 0, so the 16th place of over here is going to be in this particular register, which is the register, the CR register. So the 16th place is going to be set over here if I do this particular command, right? If I or this, or this was equivalent of basically doing this hexadecimal of this 0x, right? Or I just called the macro, so the same thing is happening. So RCC HSE on is basically equivalent of ORing this with this particular value. Alright, and what does this do? If you see in the CR register of this RCC CR, I'll just go back up there, and if you see in the 16th place, if I go to the 16th place over here, you have the HSE on. How are you going to set the HSE on? If you see what is going to happen whenever you're going to set 0 or 1 over here, if I go to HSE on, I see the definition. If it is set to HSE on, it is going to tell me that it is going to use the HSE on is a high speed enable register, right? So HSE on is going to use the HSE oscillator. What is the HSE oscillator? Coming back to my CubeMX, I have my HSE oscillator from here, which is basically your external oscillator, right? So any doubts still here? How did I get to this HSE register, and how does it turn it on, and what is going on over here? Any doubts? Just raise your hands. I am all ears today. All right, I see that there are no doubts, which is really good. All right, so after doing this, you set the power enable clock same way. So how do I know the steps? Since I'm being programming this, I know the steps, but if you want to know how to see the steps, it is all there inside your programmer's manual. You just have to find it. Of course, you are not going to work like this for each and every of your assignment and each and every of your code. You have the abstraction, best to use that, no use to get into detail. But whenever code breaks, you want to know what is going on in the background. So this was one way, this was the one thing that you want to do initially. Next, you are going to set the power enable clock. Similarly, APB1 ENR, which is the advanced peripheral bus power enable clock. So if I go to the RCC, I can see this APB1 ENR. So inside this, if I just open this, and I think I have this in my bookmarks, RCC registers. Yeah, you can use the bookmarks in order to see where these are. Okay, so I have this APB1 ENR, which is the advanced peripheral bus 1 enable register. So if I click on this, I see the APB1 ENR, and this is basically going to OR it with this particular value. If I see the macro expansion of this, I will get the value of this. I go to the definition of this, and this is equivalent of 10000. So if I just put the value of this particular file or this particular number in my calculator, I just paste this. This is equivalent of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 7 for the 28. So this is the 20th place. So if I see on the 20th place, okay, I have the power enable register. And if I want to see what happens when I set 0 and 1, I can always come down and see over here, power enable register, PWR EN. Alright, so again, these bit numbers correspond to your particular bit values. So bit number is the register number, the particular position in the bit. And if I set the bit number to 1 or 2, if I set it as 1, it is going to enable the power interface to that clock. Okay, so you are providing the power to the clock. What is that equivalent in this? We are basically providing a clock to my HSE1. Alright. Next, we are going to set the prescalers. Prescalers is divided by 1 divided by 2. It's all going to happen in the same way. It's going to be set in the configuration register. All these three configuration register, you have to OR the value of the divider. So a particular divider will have a particular value. And where do you get the value? Again, go to your programmer's manual. See this. I want to set my configuration register CFGR. So CFGR has the value for prescalers. So the first is RCC configuration HPRE, PPRE and PPRE2. So if I come over here, you can see all these things in over here. You have the HPRE, which is this basically the prescaler for HSE, PPRE and PPRE2 is basically these two values. If you want to set the different prescalers, these are going to multiply and divide to give a particular output at your frequency domain in your particular location. So divide by 1, again if I go to the definition of this, divide by 1 has a particular macro value 0x0000, which is basically this particular location. So the first one 10, if I go down bit 0 and 1, I'll see the value. If I set it as 00, it is going to set as an HSI in my system clock. It is going to switch it. So basically these are all switches for going to for setting your different configuration. Then similarly for prescaler divide by 2, divide by 3, so on and so forth. Okay, so once you are done with this, we are going to enable the phase lock loop, because I want that to be enabled. I have an external input and I want my clock to be precise, and I will then wait for it to become ready. So over here I enable this, and in order to check that, I am going to do a NOT of a OR statement, of an AND statement. RCC-CR, if I go to the RCC-CR, it is going to AND it, it is going to compare it, and then if I get a 0 over here, or if I get a 1 over here, so if I have RCC-CR and the if it is going to, or with PLL ready. Let's see what is going to happen. So RCC PLL ready in my clock register. Alright, so RCC PL ready in my clock register. What is RCC PLL ready? You can see PLL RDY, PLL RDY, PLL RDY. Okay, so if the bit 1 is set over here, if you see the macro expansion of this, go to definition of this RCC PL RDY. This has the macro expansion of this particular thing. So this is basically going to expand to bit 25. So if you have the value of bit 25 set in your CR register, it is going to compare this. If it is not set, it is going to keep on looping. Once it is set, it is going to be ready and it is going to come out of this loop. So on and so on for your configuration, RCC configuration register for your clock source, as well as this. So once you are done with this, you are ready with the setting of your clock. And clock is very necessary for doing things like delays and everything. But in general, even your processor core needs a clock, so you need to set that. Alright, so till here we have just done the preparation work for setting up my clock, and this was equivalent of this particular section in your main.c file. So this was system clock config, and all these things that we wrote over there was all equivalent of setting and resetting these parts. You have your prescaler dividers, you have your clock type, you have your multiplier struct. So all of these are there in the struct, and you just invoke the struct particular element. Over here you use the dot notation. In my keel I just use the arrow notation because it's a type def of a certain type, and I am pointing to a particular bit inside my register. My RCC is a register, even register set basically, and I am pointing to a particular register inside that register set. This is a type def, this is the element. Okay, so any doubts still here in the system clock config? Alright, no doubts. Great. So I'll just move on to the GPIO config. So till here, once you are done with the RCC clock enable and clock configuration, we will be moving on to the GPIO configuration. So now in order to set the GPIO, you have to enable the GPIO clock, and then you have to set the pin as output, and finally you have set the output mode. These are the three main steps that you have to follow. So in order to set that, I want to go into the AHB enabled. Where do I know my GPIO clock? I just showed you over here. This is present in my APB2, which is connected to my AHB. So first I have to set this AHB, and then I have to set the APB2. Alright, since I already set the APB2 over here, I do not need to do it again, but I have to set the AHB, so that is going to provide the clock to this. So I set the GPIO clock to this AHB ENR, AHB advanced high speed bus enabled. What is this? This is basically doing a bit shift by one position. I could also do a macro expansion of this and show you, but this is how it's happening. Next, I am going to set the pin as output. How do I set that? I go to my GPIO C register. So if I open the bookmarks and if I go to the different, sorry, this is the pin. Okay, so if I go to the different registers, I have my GPIO registers over here, and this GPIO registers I will be setting, I will be looking for my CRH. CRH is the higher register for your configuration. Now again here high and low stand for 0 to 7 is the lower set of registers or the lower set of pins, and 8 to 13 or 8 to 15 is the higher set, and 13 is a higher set. So I want to access the CRH. Okay, so in order to access this, this is GPIO X, which is C. X stands for your port number, so GPIO C, and then you have the CRH. CRH is the CR high register, control register high. Okay, so inside this I am going to set my PC 13 bits, and I am doing a bit shift 10 and I'm ORing it with this. So bit shift 10 is basically going to set 1 in the 11th position, sorry, in your 9th position. It's starting at 0, so it's going to set it at the 9th position. Okay, so after you do that, I am going to OR it with the value of the data in my CRH. And what is there at my 9th position? I have configuration for PC13 for bits 11 and 10. Okay, 10 and 11 is going to set the, okay, this is for the 10th one, it's not for the 13th one. So in fact I have to set the 20 and the 20th bits to output. And how do you set that? I go to mode 13, and mode X, mode Y is basically your port number. So port X is basically your C, and your Y is going to be the pin number. So mode 13 is going to stand for the pin 13. So pin 13, if I want to set it as an output with a maximum speed of 10 megahertz, I have to send a 01 to this. So how I am going to do that? I am going to set a 01 by, I am going to bit shift 01 to this particular location. What is this? Mode Y, my 13 is at location 20. So I will be bit shifting it by 20. Alright, so this is how I set it as an output. Once you are done with that, once the output is set, you can then also set the so I was setting the CRH and I was going for the CNF bit. Now we can also set the mode bit. So if you want to set the output mode, we did that, and then I want the output mode speed to be this. So this is how you set it. Alright, so any doubt still in the GPIO setting? Once you are done this, you are done with this, you are done with the setting of the GPIO. And now in order to set it as high or low or turn it on and off, you go to your while loop, and then you have the bit set and the reset register. This is basically where you reset or set the pins. I go back to my GPIO. I am calling the A pin, but I want to really call the C, so I'll just do this. Okay, and this is doing a pin number 5, but I do not want to do a pin number 5. I want to do it in pin number 13. So bit set reset register and pin number 13. Okay, you see a delay function with such a large value. This is a custom delay function. Again, I will be sharing this file with you in GitHub, so don't worry. You will be getting this file, and you can access this in order to do your assignment. So once you set the configuration mode of this, then you go to your function. I made a while function, which is basically a loop, and this is going to set the pin as high or low after a delay. So in order to set that, I set and reset register are the pins that you have to register, that you have to toggle in order to basically set it as a high or a low. So all these BSRR has all the 16 bits, and X, how do you access it? You call the port number and you call the register, and then you do a bit shift at that particular place which you want to set or reset. Alright, so if you want to reset a pin, you have to bit shift, you have to AND it with a 0 and then invert it. And if you want to do a reset, if you want to do a set, then similarly you are going to do it. So there is a way of doing set and reset in this. There are a total of 32 registers. So if you are going to set 1 in the reset bit, it is going to reset it. If you are going to set 0 in the reset bit, it is going to set it. You can do both of these from here, so you don't have to do an AND operation. You can just write something, the other one is going to automatically invert. Alright, and once you are done with that, you have the set and the reset done. I'm not going to explain the delay function. I'll just provide this function to you. You can just use this particular function in your assignment. So now coming to your assignment. Okay, by the way, this is the assignment solution for week 1. Most of you have completed the assignment, so kudos. So, and those who have not, I think the time is out. So but basically this was really simple thing. You just have to initialize the variable, and since it was you have to declare the variable, basically it was not declared, so it was showing an error. All right, so now for the assignment of the second week, you have to write a program in embedded C and use the register manipulation method which I just showed. Then you have to use that to toggle an LED pin whenever the sum of a counter is going to become a multiple of 5. So you have to make a counter which is going to count till 5, put it in a loop, which is going to basically count till 100, 1000, and whenever the sum it is a multiple of 5, so say 5 or 10 or 15, it is going to toggle the pin. So for the first iteration, it is going to first instance of 5, it is going to set it as high, and then next 5 it is going to set it as low. So for each multiple of 5 it is going to set it as high, and each multiple of 10 it is going to set it as low. So you have to count till 1000 and then reset it to 0, but you have to basically use the function which is going to find a multiple of this, and then that is how you're going to manipulate this. So in my program I have this set it as an infinite loop, but you have to add a if else condition over here in order to check that condition which I just showed. You have to divide it by 5. The procedure is going to be the same for the way I have showed you for Keil MDK, and only include the core and startup file into your project, basically, because that is the way you are going to do the bare metal programming. And the way you're going to submit it is you have to send me the link same way. You have to upload the code. You have to, in this case, you have to upload all the files. So upload your entire project to this, and basically send me a screenshot once you do the build. You have to do a successful build and also a successful compilation, since you already know I mean a successful debugging, since you already know what is the debug way. So how do you know if it is working or not? Basically you can go and check the bit set reset register in your address pin, right? So once I do the debug for this, you will you have to do the same method for debug. So you just see the value of the register over here inside your programmer's manual. You see that this port offset is at 0x10. So what is the address of this bit set reset? You have to go to your register map. How do you access that? You go over here, and I think you have the registers. Yeah, you have your GPIO registers. You can get it from this. So I think there is a map somewhere where you can find the list. I'm not really going to find it for you guys. Just find it is there in this document itself. Alright, so or if you just want to see the base address, you go to this, you come over here, and I think it will be showing you the memory of this. Yeah, so this is all the peripheral memory map, and then GPIO port C. Then you saw that base address, it's going to start with that at this particular address, and these are basically the register maps. So offset, if you are going to see the BSRR, we started with that a certain value. You just add 10 to that in hexadecimal, use your calculator, and you can check it in that particular register using the memory watch method that we were doing while debugging. Alright, so any doubts for regarding this assignment? I'll again share it in the group. I'll in fact also share this recording of today's session in the group. So any doubts over here in this assignment, what you have to do, or anything as such? All right, so I assume then we can end this session. None of you have a doubt. Again, I will be sharing all of this in the group, so no problem over there. Okay, so I hope we can end the session. Are any of you even there, or
So can you send the recording?
yeah, I'll be sending the recording, don't worry. Give me some time. I'll be sending it probably by end of the day today or maybe tomorrow morning, so don't worry over there. If you still have any problems with bare metal, just ping me in WhatsApp after seeing the recording, obviously. All right. So thanks a lot for being there in today's session. Hope to see you again tomorrow. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.